This is Alan Baker, or Sifu Alan as I call him. You may have seen him in recent viral YouTube videos and may have heard him referred to as the KFM guy, or that guy who does the Keezy fighting method and makes all the crazy, scary faces sometimes. What you don't know is that Sifu Alan has been my chief instructor for about 22 years now, and not only did I get my first black belt from him, but I was the first person he ever gave a black belt to. Well, me and another student named Todd Williams. Hi, Todd, if you're listening. I not only got my black belt in Jeet Kune from him, I also got my black belts in Kung Fu and Indonesian Silat from him, and was the head instructor at his school, the Atlanta Martial Arts Center, for about 7 years. And I was actually prepping for my black belt in the Keezy fighting method back when I had to leave. I still train with Sifu Alan and Sifu David Mitchell here, who used to be a student of mine actually, and is now an instructor of various martial arts himself. Recently, Sifu Alan asked David and I to help him with some instructional videos for an online archive he's putting together. And so for the past couple of weeks, we've been putting in 8 hours a day on the weekends to create a massive archive that contains all the knowledge he's accumulated in over 40 years of training. With over 25 black belts in various martial arts, that's a lot of knowledge to cover. Sifu Alan is ridiculously knowledgeable in the martial arts. He's also a powerful fighter, a highly focused researcher, and also very playful.
What happened to the phone?
That's here.
Oh, is it there? Oh.
Sometimes he makes the mean faces in his videos and people comment saying, "That guy looks intense," or "That dude is scary." But honestly, it's just a byproduct of having decades of instructors, some of whom insisted on that level of intensity from him. And so it's just kind of become part of who he is. He's not just practicing the moves, he's practicing the mindset. And that's something he always insisted that myself, his students, and the people he trained to become instructors underneath him, he always insisted that we kind of have that mindset too. If their goal was to get better at combat, I should stress. The ability to turn it on and off is something that Alan is uniquely gifted at, and it's his level of intensity is kind of what made some people take notice of him in recent videos. And he always kind of demanded that of me and David, who you see in this video, and others. Now, before we get to the fun little video that I put together here and wanted to share, I just want to say that Sifu Alan has always been focused on self-improvement. And he is that great sort of teacher that actually wants his students to learn, like really wants them to learn. And he will commit to making sure that they do. His mind never really shuts off.
And in my mind, I want to try to exit quicker than I enter to the punch.
He develops new drills if he has to. He will invent new teaching methods and approaches to training, if that's what it takes to help students digest the material that he's putting out there, that he's trying to get them to learn. The same goes for Sifu David Mitchell, who you see here, who trains closely with Alan in a variety of martial arts. And it's been great to see him to go from being my student to someone who can now teach me, because he's gone off and learned so many other martial arts and so many other things. And it's great to see him just kind of flourish that way. And that's something that Sifu Alan Baker has always encouraged us to do as his students. Go out there, find more stuff, see if it works, bring it back to the laboratory, meaning the school, and to your training partners, train it, see what works. Now, some of what you're going to see in this video and these montages here is really just us going over some basics in Filipino Kali, Jeet Kune Do, things like that. Here, we were training some stick work using Filipino martial arts, an array of Kali, Eskrima, and Pakita Tertia weapon styles. These stick drills allow us to ingrain certain movements through constant repetition and prepare ourselves to defend close quarters weapons angles, and then attack on other angles. These are the very basics. It's like learning scales on the guitar if you're learning to play the guitar, or the home position on a keyboard when you're first learning how to type. It's very basics. It's just putting your hands in certain positions and remembering like what you might call a home position on on a piano or a keyboard. Then here you'll see us getting in some light shadow sparring, as we call it. It's no gear, just training at range and at low intensity, mainly looking for angles of attack and escape, using what's called broken footwork. You'll see us lifting our feet in a sort of exaggerated way. Paquita tertia is a form of Filipino kali that uses this to keep the feet, the front foot especially, to keep it moving so that the practitioner stays light enough on their feet to move, or it could also become a front kick later, like a check. And it also keeps you from getting your feet stepped on, like I do to David here, which can really jam you up in a weapons fight, putting you off balance. And really, I'm just showcasing my love for the Filipino martial arts here. All of them, really. I mean, one thing that I find really fascinating is that, as you can probably already see in this footage here, unless you move, and I mean seriously move your whole body as you're fighting in a weapons fight, then weapons fighting becomes practically impossible. You have to learn to move. Like, you have to move. You can't just stand there and defend all angles, hitting your weapon against your opponents, like clanging the way you would in a movie fight, and count on never getting hit. Even a single hit to the hand could shatter all the bones in that hand and cause you to, lose your grip on your weapon. So you can't even let your wrist get out there and get hit by the opponent's weapon. And a single hit to your eye or skull, and that could be lights out. So you have to keep moving. And as you can see here, what we're trying to do every time we take a hit, every time we see it coming, you're trying to take an angle. There's a male triangle, female triangle, what they call it. It's a certain footwork. There's a broken footwork. There's a stutter step. There's these ways of moving as the weapon is coming in, for either long range or mid range. Now, when you get in very close, into close range, that's when the weapons are basically like almost just like a punching weapon. Alan also does a crap load of tactical training. He's worked, like I said, with law enforcement and different people, and he has developed through them and through his own sort of vast knowledge of martial arts, stuff like you see here.
In this position,
What you see here is him talking about weapon retention, how to hold the firearm and make sure if someone's trying to reach for your firearm and they're holding on tight, and they're trying to pull the weapon from the holster. Maybe they came up behind you, maybe they're in the middle of a fight and someone just reaches and grabs for it. And he's talking about ways of preventing that. And then here you see how he's augmented ground fighting from things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, combat submission wrestling, the Kizi fighting method. I mean, you name the ground system, Indonesian Silat, and he's working it here, but modifying it to protect the firearm around his belly, around where he happens to have it. There's a system of moving on the ground and takedowns and sweeps and that are specific to having a firearm on, because Alan found out that if you have body armor, it changes. If you don't have body armor but you have your firearm and someone's trying to grab it, it changes your priorities in a grappling contest, on the ground in the street. It changes it. And he also does a lot with arts that you might not expect of him, which is Kung Fu. That's actually how he got his start, which brings us to our next segment. Okay, guys, so I've been training with Sifu Alan all day. He's going through all of his C-Tac, which is civilian tactical. We've been going through Filipino Kali, a little bit of JKD, and he's been my main instructor for 23 years. And recently he's been recording basically all his knowledge, which is a lot. We've been trying to get it all, training for, filming for 8 hours a day. And I had a question for him because he's online a lot. You see a lot of Alan with, he's got the pistol or he's doing some kind of punching, drills like self-defense. You see the Kizi stuff. And but I know that his roots are in Kung Fu. He started in traditional martial arts, and I know it's still near and dear to his heart. And I just wanted to, I had a question. I figured might as well film it because I think it's an interesting, and he's got a extensive history with it. And I was just going to say, if you were going to teach something in Kung Fu, and teach people kind of your philosophy and approach and what it's about, what do you, like if someone comes up to you and says like, Kung Fu, what's all that about? Like, why would you train that, or as opposed to something that'll really work in the street? So what makes you love it so much, and what is it to you?
When we start getting down to the meat of Kung Fu, for me, it is what they do energetically. And it's kind of hard to express that in conversation, as you know.
Yeah.
Because we've had those conversations, and it's like, well, it's like this, it feels like this, it'll do this. And eventually we'll go, okay, just come over here, feel this, right? And they all go in that direction.
Yeah, pretty much.
Whether it is you're moving somebody or you're punching them through a phone book. And then after you have that physical contact, right? So, and if you look at the structure of traditional Kung Fu, it was built on a family system. Because normally they didn't teach the information outside of the family. And you look at the meaning of Sifu, right? It has a couple of different meanings, but fundamentally it's father or teacher. Right? It's like, well, dad teaches the Kung Fu class for the family once a week, and we go.
Yeah.
And you look how the structure was set up. Generally, they had like, the master, Sifu, whatever, and then they had what they called at the time disciples, and then you had students. Well, traditionally, the students never put their hands on the master.
Right.
Yeah.
He was kind of guarded in a way, or
right.
The disciples got to talk to him, but not the students.
Yeah, and the division was the disciples got to put their hands on him. And it comes back to the conversation we just had. Well, why? Because that is how that information was actually passed. When you start looking at what it does uniquely, which is the study of energy, it's that knowledge is passed through touch, and they knew that. So they're like, well, I'm picking the students that I want to get this information. Maybe they're the seniors, they've been around for a little while. And we're going to call them disciples, and those are the only ones that put hands on the master. And then generally those guys went and taught the student at the school, right. or the younger brothers and sisters.
Right.
Right. So now based on that, what is that stuff that they teach? And you asked me, why keep it around? Yeah. Why have I trained it for, 45 years now.
45 years.
And still actively pursuing it and looking for more.
Yeah.
I have a teaching and self-education mind tool that I use, and it's called the layered skill development. And there are multiple layers to it, but we usually focus on 3. Now, you can use this as an instructor to teach, and it'll make you a better teacher. But if you're out there and you're a student, you can use this to be a better student, because you can use it as a self-education tool to help you learn better, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So if this tool points out some areas of training that you don't know, you can go find it, and that's great, right? So what are those layers of skill development? Number 1, super easy. It's technique. And you could do a search on YouTube and find thousands of techniques, right? You can make lists of technique all day long, and we have to have that. That's the fundamental structure of learning is technique. But there's got to be more. Have you ever learned tons of techniques? Maybe you're an intermediate advanced martial artist and you have hundreds in your head, and you're like, what's next?
What's next?
More techniques? Well, for me, what's next is the next layer, which is attribute development. And so what is an attribute? Timing could be an attribute. Today we're talking about developing tactile sensitivity in the body. Much like in Wing Chun Kung Fu, they do Chi Sao to develop. One of the things it develops is an understanding of sensitivity. And it also does talk about leverage, but that could loosely be considered an attribute as well. Good timing could be an attribute. So anytime you learn a technique and you think to yourself, well, I want to get better at the technique, an answer is attribute development. If I get better sensitivity, I'll be better at my technique. If I understand timing in a different level, I'll get better at my technique. So there's a third level, and this is how it relates to Kung Fu, and I call that third level body state training. So what is an example of body state training? Imagine studying tension control in your body. And what do I mean by that? If you imagine a scale of 1 to 10, and 1 being a dead body, completely turned off. If you've ever picked someone up like a child who's just completely limp, they feel 3 times heavier than they look, right? So they've completely turned off all the tension in their body. And the other end of the scale would be fully activated. And when I talk about this, I'll commonly use the example of someone who has been electrocuted. And that muscle fiber has been activated at full capacity.
Completely, the whole body is completely thoroughly tense.
Right, and you can do research and you'll find out that commonly when that happens, it'll rip tendon and muscle off of bone. Yeah. We actually have a organ in our joints called the Golgi tendon organ that helps protect us from doing that. It doesn't allow us to have full access of high levels of flexion. So based on that scale, and in Kung Fu that the more relaxed you are, like the young man we're trying to pick up, and he just goes limp, the more substantial you are.
Yeah.
Good jiu-jitsu players will do this. They'll start getting good at this around purple belt naturally. They start getting some confidence in class, and then they'll relax. And all of a sudden you're like, man, you feel like you're an extra 100 pounds, an extra 200 pounds heavier. How did you do that? You don't look any bigger.
Right.
Well, they've, through really a byproduct of their training, learn to relax, right? Now, the average person can't really shut off tension in their body below a 4 unless they're trained. And the average person can't activate tension in their body, let's say above a 6, unless they're trained. Imagine having training that gave you the ability to access both ends of that scale.
To go to when you want it.
Right. And so imagine I had a drill I could do on a daily basis, and it gave me the ability to turn off tension, residual tension in my body down to a 2. Like that young man, imagine how much more substantial you'd be.
Yeah.
That could be useful, especially if you could apply it to the technique we talked about earlier, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Or I had the ability to activate flexion at a high level in my body, which is generally loosely related to strength in your body. And if you go to the gym and lift weights, you're training this to an extent.
Right.
If you train your body like that at the gym, you probably can activate at a 7 or an 8. But you'll look at different systems like stone warrior training in Kung Fu. And those guys learn to activate it at a high level. They don't look big, but they're extremely strong.
Yeah.
And that's because through their training, their drilling, their daily drill, they've gained the ability to access high levels of flexion. Imagine if you could do both. If you go to the gym and you can make the muscle bigger and activate high levels of flexion, man, that'd be great. So both of these things that we're talking about is body state training. It's not a technique. It's not an attribute. It is a state that you can activate in your body really when you're doing anything. You could do it with that technique we're talking about, or if I had to go out in a parking lot and push a car for a buddy, if I have more control of myself,
you could activate.
I'll be stronger. I'm going to be more substantial just pushing the car because I learned how to enter that state of being. And if you think, wow, that's pretty cool. And that is the layers we're talking about. So if you're at the top, you go, man, more techniques. Well, the next one might be attributes to make that better. You might not need new techniques. And then if you're doing attributes now, well, what's next? It might be some type of body state training, because we've just discussed one method of body state training, and there's a list of them. There's a list of universal principles that are all related to body state development. And all of these things come from Kung Fu. Multiple different systems of Kung Fu.
I've trained with you now, like I said, 20 something years, and something I hear all the time when people are grappling with you. I've grappled with you, I don't know how many times, and people always say you don't feel like an average jiu-jitsu guy. When I spar with you in boxing, people say even though we're doing a Muay Thai class, they're like sparring with you, it feels different with the timing and things like that. And that's all Kung Fu, but you're saying that really you do Jiu-Jitsu and you do exactly what they tell you to do, and in Muay Thai you do exactly what is to do. But for you, your personal expression, the martial arts, that Kung Fu can't help but come out because you've done it so long. Your body state has essentially changed.
Correct. And I will say this too, it's a common thing for me. Chad had to listen to this for years. All systems, all martial arts systems are designed by man for man. Therefore, man, the human machine, is ultimately the answer and not the system. And that is very important. And this is actually something else that comes from Kung Fu, is they have what they call mind development tools, scholar training. You know, we talk about Qigong. There's actually 3 types of Qigong: warrior Qigong, health-based Qigong, and scholar Gong. And so imagine having the ability to change your mind state. Yeah. And so that's in Kung Fu too.
If you're not a warrior, being able to turn on the warrior, or if you've got too much warrior in you, being able to turn on the healer aspect or the scholarly aspect.
Exactly. And you know, going back to what we're discussing there, Kung Fu, you know, that is one of the jewels that it comes from. It's looked at as a system a lot of times, but it is actually kind of an anti-system. You know, they have mind tools that make you look at what you're doing on a 1,000-mile view based on the human machine. Yes, they do learn systems too. We have to do that. But the farther I've gone, the more you get away from that mindset, and the more it becomes the system of you. You're right. It becomes, you become what you change.
Yeah.
You become the system. And I like to implement that in a lot of the things I do, like, you know, from the civilian tactical program. And that mindset, again, was borrowed from Kung Fu.
If someone is out there wondering, okay, how do I get involved in Kung Fu? Do you have literally just go find the nearest Kung Fu school? Or is it like a book? Or is it, how would you suggest? I mean, I know you have a program that has living mechanics, and some of that has Kung Fu aspects in it. How would you recommend someone just kind of get started? Is there some very basic things you could do in your everyday life? Like I know there's breathing drills you've done. Yep. There's all sorts of openings that you do. Is there something that you say, if you had to kind of make like a beginner program, what would you say to someone? Hey, start with this, start with the breathing, or start with this. What would you do?
Well, I would suggest finding a good mentor, a good teacher.
Yeah.
And you know, that can kind of be difficult if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, because it can be crowded out there, figuring out who's what. Yeah. Okay.
You know, different people do martial arts for different reasons. And some of them, those reasons that we spoke of, that's not why they do it.
Yeah.
You know, they may do it because they want to know forms. Yeah. They want to know techniques and do those type of things, and they don't care about any of that.
Right.
Some do it because they want to develop like sensitivity in certain, or they just want to study a system for the sake of the system, you know, just to go, hey, I study this, it's cool. So you have to find a teacher that understands it at an energetic level. That can kind of be tough sometimes, finding that guy.
It can be.
Yeah, and so that guy will have those things. And I was very fortunate that I met those mentors and teachers, and I recognized those things. You know, I said, well, I know this system over here is great at this. Jiu-Jitsu, they're so good at this over here. Judo, man, they're great at this. Combat submission, they're so good at this here. But Kung Fu, the things we're talking about right now, they're the best at doing that. They absolutely are. And it's not that other systems don't talk about it and just go, hey, you know, you need to relax. You need to calm down a little bit.
Yeah, they'll just say, yeah.
But what makes Kung Fu unique is it has a detailed, precise educational process for these things. It has a curriculum. And like I said, you have to find somebody that has that curriculum.
Well, I'm glad to have spoken to you about it. I'm glad to sort of, because you don't get a chance a lot of times to talk about it. You teach law enforcement, you've taught all kinds of people, you teach private lessons, and you do the civilian tactical. And I'm glad that that I got to pick your brain a little bit today, because
Sure.
I don't get to see him. I see him maybe once a week now, but to pick his brain on that. Sifu, thanks for being on the channel. Guys, he's got an archive that's growing every day. If you want to know about living mechanics, if you want to know about, which has a lot of this stuff in it, and if you want to know about civilian tactical, you want to know about firearms and how to, if you had to grapple, if you had multiple opponents, whatever, he does a lot of that. And that is on sifualanbaker.com.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
So guys, check that out. And I'm going to probably doing some more videos about it. If you have any questions about like, hey, where is Alan, or where does he train at? Well, he's in the Atlanta area, but if you have any more specific questions, you can go to his YouTube channel, or you can hit me up with a message. And train hard and train safe.